آراش عزيزي, Iranian author and historian. Welcome to النهار.
Thank you for having me.
The drums of war have beaten in the region louder than ever since the assassination of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh and Hezbollah commander. Looking to get your views on the potential scenarios are you waiting for a direct confrontation? Would be any regional and international complications of such confrontation?
Since October last year, really, everybody has been afraid of this moment, of the possibility of an all-out war, a direct confrontation between Iran and Israel that could really lead to something bigger, activate all the Iranian allies and assets in the region, and bring all the Israeli allies and really lead to an all-out war. This has been a worry since October, and it became more of a real worry since April 2024, when Iran and Israel exchanged fires for the first time, really directly, right? Iran lobbed hundreds of missiles on Israeli territory. Now, today, as I'm speaking to you in early August, we are closest that we've ever been to such a possibility. But I still don't see it as I still don't think it's what is eventually going to happen. I think there is enough. There's enough fear and sense, a sort of good combination of those on the Iranian leadership to want to avoid this possibility. And also Israelis know that this can be a very dangerous confrontation for them. And there's a lot of pressure on them from the United States, from Europe, from the regional powers to not do this. And there's also there's basically a lot of pressure on both Iran and Israel to prevent this. So I think very much it can be prevented. But is it possible for it to happen? Absolutely. Because we are in a very dangerous stage. Iran does need to do something because of how much it has said it's going to do something. It would look very foolish if it just doesn't do anything. It's a question of what it would be. It is also the case, though, that if Iran is able to gain major concessions, if it's, if a ceasefire in Gaza is achieved, then Iran can somehow spin that as having, been a result of its, if it not attacking Israel. It can then stand down, and as can Hezbollah. But it's a very dangerous situation we're in, and it's also the question of whether Israel might feel weakness on part of Iran and Hezbollah and want to push an attack anyways, especially since Netanyahu, the prime minister there, fears for his political career and perhaps sees an all-out war as the only way out.
We felt a few days ago that an attack will be imminent. But now, since then, there were so many pressures, international efforts to avoid such confrontation. Do you think something happened between the assassination and today?
Well, there are, of course, a lot of things happened. First of all, I have to say that Iran does like these psychological games as well. It really enjoys them, and it's much easier than attacking. So, when you have everybody says, well, the attack is imminent, it's going to happen on Sunday, it's going to happen on Monday, and then, Israelis all go at home and they're worried, and Israel gets ready, and the prime minister Netanyahu goes into a bunker. Iranians enjoy these psychological operations. They think, this is their way of, in an asymmetrical situations, even if because they know in the direct confrontation, they're not going to be a match. So they use this sort of asymmetrical methods. But also, yes, a lot has happened. I think, obviously, we don't know everything that is said behind the closed doors, but we do know that Americans have sent messages. It appears that America has sent very serious messages that, if you break out of war, you're going to pay with the consequences. It's also important that the Jordanian Foreign Minister, Ayman Safadi, was in Tehran over the weekend. You could see that he was, even though Iran basically said, no, we reserve a right to respond when we want and as we want, you could see that Safadi was very stern and he had taken very serious messages to Tehran, probably on behalf of himself and his country, but also on behalf of United States and possibly even Israel. So it's bound to the fact that must have led to European capitals sending messages back to Tehran, warning it about the possible consequences and telling Iran, it's very clear, if Iran starts a war, if now it attacks Israel directly and it gets into a war, in many ways it will be really isolated. There's not a lot of Arab countries or European countries that will stand by it. Seeing as it already
but can Iran
power imbalance between Iran and Israel, this would really benefit Israel.
Can Iran not to respond to such humiliation?
Look, there are ways. Iranians are masters of spinning, so they might do something little. It's not actually just the humiliation that is hard to not respond to. It's the fact that they've said so much. I mean, Khamenei's
Yeah.
banner of his website now says, blood revenge. They've been keep talking about this. So, they if you keep talking about this and don't do anything, you might sound a little foolish. But it won't be the first time. After all, the Iranian regime also threatens to destroy Israel for 40 decades, and it's hasn't really attacked it except for once, right? And after all, for example, after the Gaza war, after thousands of Palestinians are being killed, Iran didn't really do much, and even Hezbollah didn't really do much for a long time. So they will find ways to spin this thing, especially as I said, if a Gaza ceasefire is able to be reached sometime soon, which I think is possible, then Iranians will have much less room to attack. But they'll spin this as some sort of a victory for them, and no matter what, this is what they do.
It could be like a repeat of April scenario.
So there are few options that are being spoken about in Iran. One is an April scenario, one is a more advanced scenario, and one is sort of a diplomatic deal, basically. But even the April scenario was choreographed, but even the choreography, as anybody who is into dance will tell you, is not easy to get right always. One of the missiles hits the town, and few dozen people die, and then Israel will be forced to respond.
What about a strike by Hezbollah? Do you expect this one and other militant groups supported by Iran? Do you think they will participate in a way or another in such a strike?
100%, yes. Hezbollah for sure. I mean, Hezbollah is already hitting Israel almost daily, like they're hitting back and forth. It's a question of it, is it gonna try to hit Haifa or try to hit the Haifa port or, hit the Israeli ships or something more significant. But yeah, Hezbollah, Houthis, maybe even the Iraqi groups, the groups that are based in Syria near the Israeli border, but not the Syrian regime itself, they probably will all take part in something of an attack on Israel.
Do you expect any dynamics change between Iran and the West with the election of reformist Masoud Pezeshkian?
Yes, there is a willingness in his significant part of the Iranian establishment, which is why Pezeshkian was allowed to run and why he was allowed to win and why he has very serious support from Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. The reason that people like Pezeshkian and Zarif, who is going to be vice president, this is the guy you bring out when you want to speak to Americans. Of course, everything hinges on the US presidential elections, but whether Kamala Harris or Donald Trump win, Iran would want a deal. I believe if it's Trump, they would still want a deal. It would complicate how you get that deal, but it's still what they want. And what kind of a deal they want? They want to give some assurances, maybe tone down the nuclear program a little bit, regulate a couple of things, but for sanctions to be lifted, it will be hard to get there.
There is a huge divisions now in the internal divisions in Iran between reformists and conservatives concerning the retaliation to the Haniya assassination. What could it lead? What could this change in the in Iranian response?
Well, it's a fascinating question and one that I'm glad you asked because many people miss this. The Iranian regime establishment, just like its society, it's really full of differences and contradictions and divisions. And Khamenei is the one who calls the shots. It's no doubt he's the one who decides, but he doesn't do it just out of his personal whim. He has to sort of respond to what he's getting from different wings of the regime. He sort of has to balance out between them. And if he didn't want to balance out, he wouldn't give the presidency to Pezeshkian. He wouldn't let Zarif be vice president, right? Now, what are the main differences? The main differences is, and there is actually more than just reformists to conservatives. There are many different factions. There are hardliners who are ideological. There are hardliners who are military. There are those who are reformists, who are democratizers. There are those who are not democratizing. They're not pro-democracy. They're not democratizing, but they're centrists and they're pragmatics, right? So it's much more than two divisions. But the reformists and the centrists and, so the pragmatic elements, it's not like they like Israel or they like the West, but they realize that if Iran wants to become serious against these other enemies that it has in the region, it needs to be economically powerful, and it needs to basically have good diplomatic relations with the West and with the region to pursue economic development. That's something that's common, you can say, between the reformists and between the centrists and pragmatics. So that's what they're pushing for. And there is, if you believe some reporting, Pezeshkian begged Khamenei not to attack Israel because he believed that it would put the country in a bad economic situation. I never know whether to believe these reports or not. We can be sure is that there is a push on the part of reformists to and the centrists to avoid a direct confrontation, because they see that as endangering Pezeshkian's new administration and endangering Iran's economic development plans, which will necessitate lifting of the sanctions, which will necessitate a new deal with the West, and which will necessitate a good relations with Arab countries in the region, chiefly Saudi Arabia, of course.
I want to hear from you about the security breaches in Iran, the recurrent security breaches.
I mean, look, Iran obviously has terrible, terrible security openings to Israel. People who are historians of intelligence, can study this, but, it's kind of, there's not a lot of precedent for this in history, as far as I know. A country can operate so much inside Iran. And mind you, Israel is a country that, of course, doesn't have diplomatic relations with Iran, there's no direct ties between the countries. So let's say if Iran wanted to infiltrate, let's say, a country like, Sweden. Well, there's tons of Iranian students in Sweden. There's tons of Iranian businessmen. There's ties between the two countries. So it's easier. In terms of Israel, there's no Israeli student in Iran.
It's not the case with Iran, yes.
Yeah, so it makes it very harder. Despite this, look at all that Israel has done in Iran. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Israel has assassinated 4 or 5 nuclear scientists, including the top one, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, in 2020. It stole the entire Iranian nuclear archives on the back of a motorcycle. In 2022 and 2023, it repeatedly arrested Iranian assets on the Iranian soil, interrogated them, videotaped them, got their information, got their document, and then released them. I mean, it's almost like Israel is a police force that's just operating in Iran, like the Tehran police force. Actually, maybe Tehran police force can't operate so easily as Israel does. So these are huge gaps that Iran has. And the reason for it is clear, if you ask me. It's because the security forces of the Islamic Republic have been really filled with elements that, above all, they have to show loyalty. So if you have people whose entire quality is that they're loyal to Khamenei, that means they're not very competent. And their focus, what's their focus on? Their focus is going after 19-year-old girls who publish stories on Instagram, going after writers, going after actors, going after singers. Just in the last couple of weeks, Sharifa Mohammed, the Iranian labor activist, has been sentenced to death. What's her crime? She's a labor activist. There was an Iranian university professor who is being prosecuted. Sorry, he's not a professor, he's a cartoonist. He's been prosecuted because he spoke about LGBT life in Iran in an internet program. So when you have security forces that you send them after these people, of course, you're not going to have time to find the Israeli spies. And it also gives you a fundamental perception of this regime. It's strong against us, against the people. It can hound us out of the country. It can jail us. It can torture us. It can kill us, but it cannot do anything to the Israeli assets. It's weak against them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arash. Hope we will have you soon again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And sorry I was late. You have a good day.
Thank you.